Hello, and welcome to population genetics, also known as evolution of populations. Okay, so I think in our previous screencast, we talked about how individuals cannot evolve. Evolution is not a property of individuals, but it's a property of populations. So populations can evolve, individuals can't evolve. Okay. And just a reminder, a population is a group that include all the members of a species living in a given area. Okay. So the actions or fates of individuals determine which characteristics will be passed on to populations. Okay. And so how they fit into their environment, how they work within their environment, how they are adapted to their environment, that allows them to live long enough to breed and mate and pass their genes on to the next generation. Okay, so inheritance or genetics provides a link between individual organisms and the evolution of a population. Okay, so it's all about the genes. All right, genes and the environment interact to determine traits. Remember, we talked about natural selection. Okay. Nature, okay, selects the traits that are going to be pre-existing traits, of course, that are going to be passed on to the next generation. And then the genetics takes over. Okay. And this is all, of course, relates back to genetics. It's all about genes, and it's all about alleles. Oh yeah, look, alleles. We remember those. Okay, so in any population, there are usually 2 or more alleles of each gene. Population genetics deals with the frequency, distribution, and inheritance of the alleles in the population. Ooh. Okay, now the alleles in the population are comprised in the gene pool. And you may have heard of this term, okay? So the gene pool is a set of all the available alleles in a population, okay? It contains all the alleles of all the genes of all the individuals in the population, okay? So it's equal to the number of individuals that carry only a single copy of a gene and twice the number of individuals that carry 2 copies of a gene, okay? So for homozygous or AA, it's equal to that number, or it's equal to twice the number of heterozygous because they have 2 alleles. Okay, only 1 allele here and 2 alleles there. All right, that's our gene pool. All right, so for any given gene, the proportion of times a certain gene or a certain allele occurs is relative to the occurrence of all the alleles. Okay, and that is what we call the allele frequency. So how often a gene appears in a gene pool compared with all the alleles in the gene pool. So let's look at an example of allele frequency. We're going to look at coat color in hamsters. Oh, I miss Rosalind Franklin. Okay. All right. Coat color in hamsters can be used to illustrate the idea of allele frequency. So say I have 25 hamsters, and there are 50 alleles in of the coat color gene in this gene pool. All right. So if 20 of those 50 alleles have code for black coats, then the frequency of the black coat allele ends up being 40%. 20 of the 50 alleles, okay, is 0.40, and we multiply that by 100 to get to the percent, and you get 40%, okay? And that's how you calculate allele frequency. It's a fraction of the whole. And here's a nice picture. It shows you, again, here's my 25 individuals. If we look, there are, how many did we say? 20. There's there and there and there. That's 20 copies of the black coat allele of the available 50. And again, 20 divided by 50 gives us 0.4D times 100 is 40%. Perfect. Okay. All right. So, how do population genetics and evolution relate to each other? So, evolution is the change of allele frequencies within a population. Okay. So, a casual observer, a non-scientist, might define evolution on the basis of change in the outward appearance or behavior of the members of a population, because that's what they can see. They can see phenotype. Okay, but a population geneticist who's really interested in evolution defines evolution as changes in the allele frequencies that occur in the gene pool over time. So we're looking at changes, CHAN, in genotype, which do lead to a change in phenotype. But you know that phenotype is an expression of the genotype. So really the underlying change is in the genotype, so in the genetics of the organism. All right. If allele frequencies change from one generation to the next, if they're different, then that means that population is evolving. Okay. Evolution is change in the genetic makeup of populations over generations. In order to study how this happens, we actually look at hypothetical populations. And we're going to look at hypothetical populations that are in equilibrium. Okay? So if a population is in equilibrium, right? What does equilibrium mean? All equal, all the same, which means there is no change happening. Okay? And if there's no change happening, then evolution is not occurring. Okay, so if we consider the characteristics of a population in which evolution does not occur, it's actually easier to understand what does cause populations to evolve. Okay, and this kind of is setting us up to study some super fun thing we call the Hardy-Weinberg principle, or Hardy-Weinberg genetic equilibrium. So it's a mathematical model proposed to describe these hypothetical populations that are not evolving. Okay. Hardy-Weinberg principle showed that under certain conditions, allele and genotype frequencies in the population will remain constant no matter how many generations passed. Okay. And then this is our equilibrium population, in which the allele frequencies do not change from generation to generation. Okay. Now, the equilibrium population is for this hypothetical non-evolving population. It doesn't really exist. But in order to establish this, there needs to be certain conditions met. Okay. If you have a non-evolving population, there are no mutations, there's no gene flow, the population must be very large, mating must be random, and there can be no natural selection. Okay. Now, all of these criteria have to be met in order for populations to not evolve. So basically, if populations are evolving, that means that mutations are occurring. Gene flow is happening. The population is can be small or large. Okay. Mating can be non-random, no natural selection. Okay, there is natural selection. So you're going to see this list at the beginning of the next screencast when we talk about how evolution actually occurs. So again, we study the Hardy-Weinberg principle, where evolution is not occurring, to figure out what actually makes evolution occur. Does that make sense? So we're basically studying what doesn't happen in order to figure out what actually does happen. It's very deep. Okay. So again, violation of one of these 5 conditions will allow changes in allele frequencies and the population evolves. Okay. This really does not happen in nature. Very few populations can be in equilibrium. Okay. And Hardy-Weinberg conditions are useful for studying the mechanisms of evolution or how populations actually do evolve. And we'll touch base with this and begin at the beginning of the next screencast. So go to the next screencast. Now, go. Go, go, go.